I still remember the day I met Ethan. Two broke dreamers sitting in a tiny coffee shop off Main Street. Both convinced we were meant for something bigger than paychecks and cubicles. He had this spark in his eyes, that kind of fire that makes you believe you're standing next to someone who could actually change your life. "I've got ideas," he said, leaning across the table, grinning. "Big ones." And I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because I needed to. Back then, all I had was a beat-up car, a laptop with a cracked screen, and a head full of hope. We didn't have money or connections or any fancy investors. What we had was hunger. The kind that keeps you awake at night. So we decided to build something from scratch. Just two guys against the world. At first, it was chaos. We were working out of my garage, the kind of place that smelled like dust and old paint. I'd spend hours calling clients who never picked up, while Ethan worked on the website, promising me that one day, people would know our name. And you know what? Slowly they did. Our little startup, a digital marketing firm, started to take shape. We didn't have a real office, just folding tables, cheap coffee, and a shared dream. Every small win felt huge. The first client who paid us $500 felt like a miracle. The first time someone left us a good review online, we celebrated like we'd just won the lottery. Ethan was the creative one. He had charm, he had vision. People liked him instantly. I was more the quiet worker, the one behind the spreadsheets, the one staying late, keeping things together. And that balance worked perfectly. He used to tell me, "Man, we're unstoppable. You and me, no one can break this team." And I believed that too. We became more than business partners, we became brothers. We'd work 12-hour days, then sit in the car eating burgers at midnight, laughing about how one day we'd look back and say, "Remember when we started with nothing?" I'd never had a brother growing up, but Ethan filled that space in my life effortlessly. He was loyal, or at least I thought he was. He remembered my mom's birthday, he helped me move apartments. He even stood beside me when I got married. Looking back now, it's strange how betrayal doesn't start loud. It begins quietly, with trust. Back then, there were no warning signs. No strange bank transfers. No odd behavior. Just two friends, dreaming, building, and believing in each other. We were the definition of self-made. Every success felt like a shared heartbeat. When our first major client came in, a regional chain that put us on the map, I remember Ethan turning to me and saying, "This is it, man. We made it." He hugged me like a brother. And in that moment, I would have trusted him with my life, and I did. You see, trust isn't built overnight. It's built over coffee-stained papers, missed holidays, sleepless nights, and shared victories. Ours was built like that, solid, unbreakable. Or so I thought. There were moments, tiny moments that I now realize were clues. Times when he brushed off financial questions, or told me, "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." I never pushed, because that's what trust does. It blinds you to the possibility that the person beside you could ever be planning something behind your back. Sometimes I replay those days in my mind. The laughter, the exhaustion, the pride we felt walking into our first rented office space. The way we'd high-five over each new client. The endless conversations about future plans, expanding, hiring more people. Maybe opening offices across states. We were building an empire, and in my heart, I thought it was ours. Ours. But here's the thing about empires. They don't always fall because of outside enemies. Sometimes they crumble from the inside, piece by piece, because of the one person you trusted most. If only I'd known back then how far Ethan would go to hide what was mine too. If only I'd seen what was beneath the surface, behind that same grin that once inspired me. But I didn't, because when you see someone as family, you don't look for cracks. You look for reasons to believe. And that That was my first mistake. You never really notice the moment when success starts to change things. It doesn't come with a warning or a sign. It just creeps in quietly like a shadow behind the spotlight. One morning, I woke up to an email that would change everything. A major client, the kind of deal we used to dream about, wanted to work with us. I remember staring at the screen, my hands shaking. I called Ethan right away. Dude, we did it. He laughed, that same loud, unstoppable laugh that made you believe in miracles. We met up an hour later, and before I could even process it, we were signing papers, shaking hands, and promising each other this was just the beginning. From that moment, life began to shift. The small office we used to rent suddenly felt too small. The folding tables were replaced by real desks, the cheap coffee by espresso machines, the garage meetings by boardrooms. Our company name, once a whisper, started showing up in local magazines. Clients were calling us now. And for the first time in years, we weren't just surviving, we were winning. But with money comes something else. Something heavier. At first, it was little things. Ethan started dressing sharper, showing up in new suits, driving a car that cost more than our first 3 contracts combined. I didn't think much of it. We were finally making it. We deserved to enjoy it. Then came the meetings I wasn't invited to. The calls he'd take outside, talking in that hushed tone he never used before. When I asked, he smiled. Just keeping things organized, man. Don't stress. I've got it handled. And I believed him. Because that's what I always did. I trusted him. Ethan took over most of the finances. He said it was easier that way, that he had a system. You focus on the creative, I'll handle the money, he'd say. It sounded reasonable at the time. After all, he'd earned it, or so I thought. But slowly, the energy between us started to change. The laughter that once filled the room turned into silence during meetings. The way he used to share every little victory, now replaced by short updates. Vague numbers, and I'll fill you in later. Late at night, I'd stay back to finish work. And I'd notice him on calls, quiet, tense, his voice low. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug. Vendors. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He said that a lot. But when you're making money together, you don't want to ruin the vibe. You tell yourself it's nothing. You convince yourself that maybe you're overthinking it. Because after years of struggle, who wants to believe the dream might already be cracking? Our company grew faster than we could keep up. New offices, more staff, bigger contracts. We started traveling for deals, meeting people we never thought we'd meet. I remember walking through airport terminals, both of us laughing, saying, "This is crazy, man. Look how far we've come." It was crazy. And I thought it was beautiful. But behind that success, something subtle was shifting. Ethan was changing. He'd started referring to clients as his accounts. He'd introduce me as my partner instead of "we built this together." Small words, but they carried weight. I brushed it off again. I didn't want to believe it. He was my brother, my friend. The guy who once couldn't afford a sandwich now carried platinum credit cards and ordered wine, like he'd been doing it his whole life. There were even jokes among the team. How Ethan was the face of the company. And maybe that's what stung the most. Because I was fine being the guy behind the scenes, but deep down, I wondered. Had he forgotten who helped build this with him? Still, I stayed quiet. Because success has a way of silencing your instincts. You don't question the cracks when the walls still look golden. I told myself everything was fine. That it was just the stress of growth, that we'd find balance again. I wanted to believe that the same friend who once shared midnight burgers with me hadn't let pride take over. But somewhere inside me, a small voice whispered, "Something's off." I ignored it. I shouldn't have, because what I didn't realize back then, what I refused to see, was that the foundation we built together was starting to shift. And Ethan, he was already building something else. something that didn't include me. It started with a phone call. Just one, simple, ordinary, the kind you get every day when you run a business. But sometimes, the smallest calls are the ones that change everything. I was in the office, finishing up some reports, when a supplier named Mark called. He sounded uneasy. "Hey man," he said, "I hate to bother you, but are you guys running late on payments again?" I frowned. "Late? No way. We paid you 2 weeks ago." He paused. Not according to my records. The invoice is still open." I remember sitting there, confused. We'd never missed a payment before. Ethan handled the finances, sure, but we always stayed on top of things. "Let me check and get back to you," I told him. Still calm. When I hung up, I immediately texted Ethan, "Hey, Mark says his payment didn't go through." A few minutes later he replied, "Bank glitch. Don't stress. I'll fix it today." Just like that. No explanation, no concern. A bank glitch. I wanted to believe him. After all, why would my best friend lie to me? So I let it go. I shouldn't have, but over the next few weeks, the little things kept piling up. A vendor saying their check was short. A client calling about a double charge. Tiny, forgettable mistakes, or so I thought. And Ethan always had an answer. "Oh, the accountant's fixing it. Yeah, we changed systems. It's just back-end stuff, man. You wouldn't want to get tangled in that mess." He'd laugh it off, pat my shoulder, and I'd move on. Because that's what trust does. It blinds you in the name of friendship. But then, my wife noticed something. One night, while I was home late going through some emails, she walked in holding one of our mail envelopes. "This came to the house instead of the office," she said. "It's from the bank." I opened it and froze. It wasn't our usual business statement. It was from a new account, one I'd never seen before. The company name was there, but the address was different. My name wasn't on it. Only Ethan's. I told myself it was probably just an alternate account, something he set up for transactions or taxes. But even as I said it out loud, I felt that uneasy pull in my gut. Still, I brushed it off. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I'd known Ethan for years. He wasn't just my business partner, he was family. But when my wife looked at me that night, I could see it in her eyes. Doubt. "Are you sure he's being honest with you?" she asked softly. I laughed. "Of course he is. Ethan's not like that. But the truth?" I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, I went into the office earlier than usual. The place was quiet, the air heavy. I opened the files on my computer, pulled up our financials, and started going through the records myself. At first, everything looked fine. Numbers lined up. Payments matched. But then I noticed small discrepancies, tiny gaps that didn't make sense. Transfers that weren't recorded, payments labeled under miscellaneous. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to make me stop breathing for a second. I stared at those numbers, my mind spinning. Maybe it was just an error. Maybe our accountant missed something. So I checked again and again, but every time I did, the same pattern appeared. Money going out to accounts I didn't recognize. That's when I started digging deeper, quietly. I didn't want Ethan to know yet. At night, after everyone left, I'd stay behind in the office pretending to catch up on work. I'd search through digital records, old bank statements, archived invoices. The more I looked, the more uneasy I became. It felt like pulling a thread. You don't want to unravel, but can't stop yourself from tugging. And then, one night I found it, buried under an old folder marked Archive 2020. There it was, a spreadsheet. One I'd never seen before. Inside were transactions, transfers made directly from our business account into a personal one. Ethan's personal account. The amounts weren't small. Some were massive. Tens of thousands. I remember sitting there in the dark, my hands shaking on the keyboard. The screen's glow felt colder than ever. My mind raced through every memory, every laugh, every handshake, every late-night promise that we'd never let money come between us. He'd already let it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at those numbers, feeling something break inside me, because I knew what they meant. I knew what he'd done. And as the sun came up, painting the office walls with light, I whispered the words I'd been too afraid to say out loud. Something's wrong. Ethan's hiding something. I closed the laptop slowly, my heartbeat echoing in my chest. The foundation of everything we'd built, the trust, the friendship, the dream, it wasn't solid anymore. It was cracking. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Because later that week, I found the first hidden account. I still remember the moment everything changed. That moment when suspicion turned into proof, and hope turned into heartbreak. For weeks, I'd been digging. Quietly, carefully. Late nights at the office, endless cups of coffee, eyes burning from staring at screens too long. Part of me wanted to stop, to pretend everything was fine. But another part, the part that couldn't ignore the cracks, kept going. And then one night, I found it. It was buried deep inside one of our shared drives, a folder I wasn't supposed to have access to. Ethan must have forgotten to change the permissions. Inside were transaction records, tax reports, and transfer logs. Most looked normal, until I saw a set of files marked consulting fees. Except, we never paid consultants. When I opened them, my heart dropped. They weren't fees at all. They were massive transfers, routed through shell companies, then sent to an offshore account in Ethan's name. I stared at the numbers, scrolling line after line. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. Millions. Every figure told a story, one of betrayal, greed, and deception. He wasn't just moving money around. He was stealing from the company we built together. And the worst part? He was doing it right under my nose. Smiling the entire time, I sat there frozen. Memories started flashing through my mind like scenes from another life. The first time we landed a big client. The late nights working side by side. The moment he hugged me and said, "We made it." Now those memories felt poisoned. Every laugh, every handshake, every toast we shared, it all felt fake. The trust I once called unbreakable had already shattered. For hours, I couldn't move. I just sat there, trying to understand how someone I loved like a brother could do this. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about betrayal, the kind that eats at your soul. I drove home that night in silence. My wife could tell something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked softly. I didn't have the words. I just looked at her and whispered, "He's been lying all this time." The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I walked into the office early, waiting for him. When Ethan finally arrived, cheerful as ever, I felt my stomach twist. "Morning, man," he said, grabbing his coffee like nothing had happened. I closed the door behind him. "We need to talk." He looked at me, confused at first, then cautious. "About what?" I slid the printed documents across the table. Pages of proof, transactions, bank names, everything. For a few seconds, he just stared. Then he laughed. "Come on, you don't actually believe this stuff, do you? It's just business movement. You wouldn't understand." My hands were trembling. "Ethan, these are your accounts. Your name's on them." He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said calmly, "You're overreacting. You've always been the emotional one." The way he said it, so calm, so sure, made me feel like I was the crazy one. He denied everything. Every number, every fact, every truth staring him in the face. "It's all a misunderstanding," he said, smiling. "Don't throw away years of friendship over paperwork." Paperwork. That's what he called the proof of years of betrayal. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't just awkward, it was heavy. Like something sacred had just died in that room. I stood there, feeling this mix of rage and heartbreak fighting inside me. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers. But the other part, the part that still remembered the friend I once had, couldn't. He looked at me one last time before walking out. "Let it go, man. You don't want to make this messy." Those words hit me harder than any scream could have. Let it go. As if all those years meant nothing. That night, something in me broke. I went home, sat in my car for almost an hour before walking inside. My wife waited at the door. I didn't have to say a word. She could see it in my eyes. The friend I trusted most had turned into a stranger. I spent the night replaying everything in my head. Every red flag I ignored. Every "don't worry about it" I let slide. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about power. Ethan thought he'd won. That I'd stay quiet. That I'd be too loyal, too sentimental to fight back. He was wrong. Because the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just hurt you. It wakes you up. And as I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the pieces of the trust he destroyed, I made myself a promise. He took what was mine. But I was going to take something he could never buy back, his peace. There's a moment in every story where rage meets reason, where you stand at the edge, ready to burn everything down. But something inside whispers, wait. That was me. Standing there, staring at the man who had taken everything from me, my trust, my friendship, my years, and smiling like nothing had happened. For days after our confrontation, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, calm, confident, untouched. He didn't just betray me. He enjoyed it. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to shout the truth to everyone, to our clients, our team, the world. I drafted emails. Angry, emotional, dangerous emails. But every time my finger hovered over send, something stopped me. Because deep down I knew, rage burns fast. But truth lasts forever. So I deleted them. All of them. I wasn't going to destroy him with words. I was going to destroy him with proof. The first person I talked to about it wasn't my wife. It was someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Tom, my old mentor. He was the one who'd taught me everything I knew about business integrity back when I started out. We met at a quiet diner just outside of town. I sat across from him, my hands gripping a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I told him everything, the hidden accounts, the fake invoices, the lies. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a while. He just looked at me, his face calm and thoughtful. Finally, he said, "You can fight him with anger, or you can fight him with truth. But you can't do both." His voice was low, steady. "Let the truth do the work." People like him, they expose themselves when the light hits. Those words stuck with me. Let the truth do the work. So I decided that's exactly what I'd do. The next few weeks were quiet, on the outside, at least. Ethan thought things had gone back to normal. He probably believed I was too broken, too emotional to push back. But behind the scenes, I was collecting everything: emails, contracts, bank statements, every late-night transfer, every vendor who'd been underpaid, every digital breadcrumb he thought he'd erased. I even started recording our meetings, casual conversations where he'd mention things he shouldn't. Each word, each smirk, each slip of arrogance, all captured. At first, it hurt. Every file I opened was another reminder of how deep the betrayal went. But slowly, that pain turned into something sharper: focus. I wasn't just angry anymore. I told myself one night as I sat surrounded by folders and files, I was ready. I started connecting with people who'd been affected by him, quiet calls to suppliers, accountants. Even a former client who mentioned Ethan had approached him privately about side projects. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fraud. And the best part? He had no idea. Every morning, I'd greet him with the same calm tone as always. "Morning, man," I'd say, pretending to review contracts while another copy of evidence downloaded silently to my drive. He probably thought I'd moved on, that I'd accepted his lies, and decided to stay quiet. But the truth was, I was building something stronger than revenge. I was building justice. One evening, after weeks of collecting everything I could, I sat at home going through the last of the records. My wife walked in, tired but smiling. "You look different," she said softly. "Lighter." I smiled back, but it wasn't joy she saw. It was resolve. "I think it's time," I said. She didn't have to ask what I meant. She just nodded. The plan was simple. I'd take everything, the proof, the transfers, the emails, to a lawyer. Someone who could handle this quietly but powerfully. No shouting matches, no chaos. Just truth, delivered in the most devastating way possible. That night, as I packed the files into a folder, I couldn't help but think back to the beginning, the garage days, the laughter, the dreams we shared. And now here I was, preparing to end it all with a few sheets of paper. It felt poetic, in a way. He'd used paperwork to steal from me. Now paperwork would expose him. Ethan had no idea what was coming. While he was busy celebrating his latest deal, I was sitting across from a lawyer, laying out every piece of evidence, one by one. When the lawyer finished reading through it, he looked up at me and said, "You've got him, completely." For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, about justice, about showing him and the world that no matter how deep you bury a secret, it always finds a way to surface. And as I walked out of that office that evening, the sun setting over the city skyline, I felt calm. Not the fake calm Ethan had mastered, but real calm. The kind that comes when you know the game is about to turn. He thought I'd moved on. He thought I'd given up, but he didn't know that I was just getting started. It's strange how quiet justice can sound. No shouting, no chaos, no revenge movie drama. Just the steady rustle of paper and the weight of truth inside an envelope. That's how it started. I still remember sitting across from my lawyer, Thomas Reynolds. He wasn't flashy, not the kind of guy who boasted about winning cases. He was calm, sharp, the kind of man who could make silence feel like power. I placed everything on his desk, folders, emails, bank records, my notes. Even the spreadsheet I found buried deep in Ethan's files. He went through each page slowly, his face unreadable. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've done half my job already. This isn't just a betrayal, son. This is fraud." That word hung in the air like thunder. I took a deep breath. "So what happens now?" He smiled slightly. "Now, we let the law speak." Over the next week, Thomas drafted something simple, elegant, ruthless in its precision. A letter. Just a few pages, but those pages carried every lie Ethan had ever told. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was factual, professional, and terrifying in how clean it was. Every transfer, every hidden account, every stolen dollar, listed clearly, with dates and evidence. At the bottom, one line stood out in bold. "This is a formal demand for restitution and full cooperation before legal proceedings commence." Thomas looked at me before sealing the envelope. "Once he reads this, nothing will ever be the same." And he was right. The letter was sent by courier. I didn't go to the office that day. I couldn't. I didn't want to see it happen. But part of me kept picturing it anyway. Ethan sitting at his desk, maybe sipping his usual morning coffee, laughing with someone, completely unaware that the moment he opened that envelope, his world would start to crumble. It was poetic. Quiet destruction delivered by mail. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was him. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, "What the hell is this?" His voice was shaking, half anger, half panic. I stayed calm. "It's the truth, Ethan. You finally got to see it in writing." He barked out a laugh. "You went to a lawyer? After everything we built? You're really doing this?" I paused. "We could have solved this like men. But you chose greed." He went silent. I could hear his breathing, quick, uneven. Then, for the first time, I heard something new in his voice. "Fear. This'll ruin me," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Because I knew. That wasn't my fault anymore. He hung up without another word. The next few days were a storm, not for me, but for him. Clients started calling me privately. They'd heard whispers, seen documents. Some had received notifications from their own accountants. Ethan tried to control the damage, I'm sure. He'd always been good with words. But words can't hide the truth forever, especially when paper trails speak louder. Contracts started falling apart. One by one, clients withdrew. Employees stopped showing up. Even the investors, the ones who used to follow him everywhere, suddenly disappeared. His empire, the one he'd built on stolen money and fake smiles, began to collapse piece by piece. And me? I stayed silent. There's a certain peace in knowing you don't have to fight anymore. You just have to watch the truth do its job. Every night, I'd get updates from Thomas, calm, measured reports about the progress. Ethan's accounts frozen. Legal notices served. Quiet meetings happening behind closed doors. It was all happening exactly as planned. And yet, I didn't feel joy. Not really. It wasn't celebration. It was closure. I'd spent years building something beautiful. A friendship, a dream, a business. He'd spent just as long corrupting it behind my back. Now, the truth was finally setting things right. A week later, I drove by our old office. The lights were off. The sign on the door, once bright and proud, was now dull, half-peeled. Through the glass, I saw a few empty desks, papers scattered, chairs overturned. The place looked like what it had become, hollow, and in that moment, I realized something. The revenge I wanted wasn't about destroying him. It was about reclaiming my peace. He'd taken so much from me. Trust, loyalty, years of my life. But now, I had something he'd never have again, the truth on my side. When I got home that night, I found the original copy of the letter on my desk. I read it one last time. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was justice, clean, silent, unstoppable. Just a few pages. But those pages carried every lie he'd ever told, and the moment he opened them, his world began to fall apart. I always thought revenge would feel loud, that it would sound like cheering or victory, or the noise of justice being served. But when it finally happened, it was quiet, almost peaceful. It began with a phone call from my lawyer, Thomas. "His accounts have been frozen," he said calmly. "The investigation's officially underway." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Months of anger, sleepless nights, and heartbreak, all leading to this one sentence. I hung up and just sat there in silence. Not smiling, not celebrating, just breathing. Because the truth was doing what I couldn't. It was dismantling everything. Ethan had built one piece at a time. The first cracks appeared in his reputation. Clients started talking. Someone leaked parts of the legal notice. At first, just whispers, rumors passed quietly in business circles. Then came the headlines. Local entrepreneur, under investigation for financial misconduct. His name. Our company's name suddenly everywhere. I remember scrolling through the news late one night. His picture popped up beside words like fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal. I thought I'd feel satisfaction. But what I really felt was relief. Because for the first time, the world was seeing what I already knew. Ethan tried to reach out at first. A few missed calls. One short email. "Let's talk. We can fix this," he wrote. But there was nothing left to fix. He hadn't just broken the business, he'd broken trust. When people like him fall, it happens fast. One day they're on top, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, pretending to be unstoppable. The next, silenced at his business, was the first to collapse. Contracts terminated. Bank accounts frozen. Partners withdrew. Even employees, people who once adored him, quietly started updating their resumes. And his so-called friends? They disappeared too. The same people who used to laugh at his jokes and ride in his expensive cars suddenly stopped taking his calls. That's the thing about success built on lies. When the truth surfaces, everyone runs. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I didn't post anything, didn't make statements, didn't brag. I just watched from a distance as the truth did its work, because deep down, I realized this wasn't victory. It was closure. And closure doesn't need an audience. One afternoon, I went back to our old office building. The one where it all began. The nameplate with our company's logo had been taken down. The hallway was empty, the air heavy with that strange mix of dust and memories. I walked through those rooms, the conference table where we used to dream, the glass walls that once held our ideas. It all felt smaller now. I found one of our old business cards lying on the floor. My name beside his. Side by side. Equal partners. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because I knew what he'd lost wasn't just money or power, it was respect. And once that's gone, you can't buy it back. While Ethan's world was falling apart, I quietly started rebuilding mine. Not with greed or shortcuts, but with integrity. I rebranded the company under a new name. Started small again, with a few loyal clients who still believed in me. I built a team that valued honesty over profit, and little by little, it started working. Each new deal felt like a breath of redemption. Each success, a quiet reminder that you don't need to cheat to win. The past didn't vanish, but it stopped haunting me. A few months later, I heard that Ethan had moved out of state. He'd sold his house, closed what was left of his accounts, and disappeared from the business world entirely. He never apologized. But he didn't have to, because in the end, the silence said enough. He'd built his empire on deceit, and the truth had torn it down. Every dollar he stole, every lie he told, it all caught up to him, not through revenge, but through justice. And as much as I wanted to hate him, a small part of me was grateful. Because without that betrayal, I might have never learned the difference between winning and deserving to win. As I stood outside the new office one evening, watching the lights flicker on through the windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fake kind you pretend to have, but the kind that comes when you finally close a chapter. It wasn't joy I felt. It was closure. Ethan's story ended with silence. Mine began again with truth. You never forget the sound of silence after the storm. It's the moment when everything that once felt heavy finally fades. And all that's left is peace. After everything that happened with Ethan, the lies, the betrayal, the downfall, I thought I'd carry that anger forever. I thought revenge would fill the emptiness he left behind. But I was wrong. It wasn't revenge that healed me. It was acceptance. In the months that followed his fall, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The noise around his scandal faded. People stopped asking questions. The headlines disappeared. And slowly, so did the bitterness inside me. For the first time in years, I could breathe again without the weight of betrayal on my chest. I learned that sometimes, the closure you're looking for doesn't come from an apology. It comes from understanding that you don't need one. Ethan never said he was sorry. Maybe he never will. And that's okay. Because forgiveness isn't about freeing the other person. It's about freeing yourself. I didn't forgive him because he deserved it. I forgave him because I did. Holding on to that anger was like holding on to glass. The tighter I gripped it, the more it cut me. Looking back now, I realize something powerful. Betrayal doesn't break you. It reveals you. It shows you who you are when the people you trust the most walk away. It shows you your strength when your heart wants to give up. And it shows you the kind of person you refuse to become. If Ethan taught me anything, it's this: money can buy comfort, but it can't buy character. Trust, loyalty, integrity. Those are things you earn every day through your actions, not your bank balance. And when you lose them, no amount of wealth can bring them back. I used to think our friendship was a story of success and betrayal. Now I see it differently. It was a lesson, a painful one, but one I needed to learn, because sometimes life removes people from your path not to hurt you, but to protect you. To clear the space for better ones, I've learned to choose peace over pride, honesty over shortcuts, and self-respect over misplaced loyalty. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know this: you will rise again. Not because of them, but in spite of them. Your strength doesn't come from what they did to you. It comes from what you decide to do next. Now, when I walk into my new office, I see a quote framed on the wall. It says, "Do good work. Be honest. Let truth handle the rest." Every time I look at it, I think of him. Not with hate, not with regret, but with gratitude, because his betrayal showed me who I truly am. It showed me that I can rebuild, that I can forgive, and that no matter how deep someone tries to bury the truth, it always finds a way to rise. Ethan thought money could buy silence. But the truth has a voice, and it always finds its way home. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because every week, we share powerful true stories of betrayal, justice, and redemption. And remember, the truth always finds its way home.